Hi, everyone. I am Kelly, and this is Two Rods Talking Politics. I'm on today with a returning guest. This is Sarah Audelo, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Youth Action. So, hi, Sarah.
Hey, Kelly. So great to be with you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. There's probably all sorts of things we could talk about today. But just in case people don't remember, could you give just a brief snapshot of what Alliance for Youth Action is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Alliance Youth Action, we are a national network of youth political power building organizations from across the country. And what that means is these youth-led and youth-focused groups are doing everything from working to register young people to vote, welcome them into our democracy, and then really digging on the issues that young people care about in their communities across the country.
Excellent. And there are all sorts of issues that I think are driving young people and all of us right now that I want to get into in a little bit. But let's start with coming up on Tuesday. So 2 days from now is the National Voter Registration Day. So can you talk a little bit about ways that people can think about voter registration day and how to get involved and make sure that really as many people as possible, including especially young people, are getting registered to vote?
Absolutely. So it's my favorite day of the year, National Voter Registration Day. It is one of the first ever what we call civic holidays. And so this is a day where we welcome in, of course, individuals, but companies and schools and parts of government, like everybody, to say, hey, let's celebrate voter registration together. Let's all uplift the importance of voter registration and then really welcome people in our democracy together by making sure they're registered to vote. And so this is a civic holiday we're on our 9th year, which is a little bananas. I feel like I was reflecting the other day. I'm like, I think we're almost at a decade. I was right. My team checked it out. But this is a civic holiday that we co-founded, and we are working with young people across the country to make sure their peers are registered because, in 2020, about 50% of young people voted, which is actually a really incredible number. But when you ask young people why they don't vote frequently, one of the responses is they're just not registered. And so that's why we have to put in that effort. Honestly, government should be doing this. Government should be taking on the responsibility to make sure that our fellow citizens are registered to vote. But when they don't, we will. And that's what we're celebrating on Tuesday.
So I'm asking this with my own personal answer, but why do we need to register to vote at all?
I mean, honestly, it is a great question. We are big fans of just throwing away voter registration. We shouldn't have to do it. The government has plenty of information on us. There are states where you don't have to register to vote already. And so sadly, we have to do it. And until we get rid of voter registration and we have something more universal, we champion changes to the law like automatic voter registration. So anytime you interact with the DMV, you're just registered to vote, as it should be. Anytime you interact with a government agency, we should just be registered to vote. The government has enough information on us. And this is really just out of, the remnants of Reconstruction and people in power trying to exclude folks from being part of our democracy. And so, sadly, this is something that we have to continue. But the great news is that young people are fighting all across the country to try to make sure our democracy works for all of us, including making sure that folks who are currently not able to vote, like those who are in prison in too many states, are able to. Groups like Chicago Votes, Next Step in Oregon. So there's a lot of not great about our democracy, to be super real. But these are moments where, our democracy should feel good. It should be celebratory. And there's a lot of things to not feel great about. But this is a day where we're trying to bring the celebration back into our democracy, where if we're not putting into practice the world we want to live in, which is one where we can celebrate democracy, then we're never going to get there. So yeah, it's ridiculous that we have to register to vote. A bazillion percent agree. And if we're going to have to, we're going to fight for automatic voter registration and same day registration and early registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, because this should just be easy.
So in the places where it's maybe not quite so easy, are there recommendations in terms of like messaging that people should do on social media or whatever to encourage as many people as possible to get registered?
Absolutely. I mean, this is where we just want to uplift all the messages of whatever. I'm registered to vote. Are you? Friends, join me in registering to vote today. That type of language is really important because we want to show that we ourselves are putting the work in and then welcome others to join us. I think the other things to think about for folks are, do you want to get involved in the fight to make sure it's easy to be registered to vote? And for young people in particular, they should check out alliancefreefaction.org and look at the awesome groups in our country who are fighting for voter registration to be easy, for voting period to be easy and accessible for all of us.
So I think a lot of us were impressed and thrilled with the participation of the youth vote in 2020. Of course, very often in midterms, the sort of historical trend has been that the youth vote does not, nobody's vote, nobody comes out in midterms, but especially the youth vote tends to drop. What do you see that looking like as we go into 2022? Is this Generation Z especially engaged? Do you think that they will, in fact, continue to be engaged even in things like midterm elections?
Absolutely. So if we go back to our last midterms in 2018, when you compare the 2018 turnout to the 2014 turnout, we saw a 10-point increase in turnout between those midterms. It was amazing. And, the groups in the Alliance Network and our friends who are not part of the Alliance Network, who are really these incredible political homes for young people, they just keep organizing on the issues that they care about. Whether it's making sure that there's a pathway to citizenship for our neighbors who have DACA or who are undocumented, whether it's making sure that we're taking care of our climate, making sure the police are not harming our communities, young people organizing, it just hasn't stopped. Now, voting is one of the many important tactics we have to engage in to make change in our country. And, between election cycles, we're seeing young people use all the tools in the toolbox to make change. So I'm really hopeful for 2022, especially that at this point, we have, 6 years of good numbers. Well, like 4, we're going to get to 6 years of good numbers increasing on turnout. But a lot of what's important there is making sure young people have the support that they need to stay engaged, to find their political homes, to make their voices heard. And that's what a lot of the groups in our network are pushing.
And, we saw, especially during the Trump years, just a ton of sort of donations and people helping with money and stuff. Are you still seeing that after the 2020 election, or has there been a dip in that kind of support?
There's always a dip after presidential election years, and sadly, this year is no different. One of the things that we saw since the Trump administration was just young people just wanting to get more and more engaged. And at groups in our network, we're overwhelmed with young people who want to apply for roles at our shops. They want to be organizers. They want to take on different roles and responsibilities to make change. And the resources are just not following with the demands of young people. And so we're constantly out here ringing the alarm to say, hey, let's make sure young people have a political home to go to. Let's make sure that they're able to be part of this work, either as a volunteer, which is a really important role, as staff, but volunteers have to be managed and have to be trained up, right? That organizing is work, and organizing takes real skills. And we have some of the best organizers in our network. And we want to make sure that they have all the tools that they need to keep bringing young people in to power building. And so I know it's not just us, sadly, it's friends at United We Dream and a March for Our Lives and elsewhere who are all like, gosh darn it, where are the resources going? So if folks are able to give, there are great places to put money.
So you've mentioned a couple of the kinds of issues that are driving young people to not just to vote, but to organize and to do a lot of work. What are some of the other issues that are especially salient for young people right now?
Yeah. So a lot of times I'm asked, and I appreciate you asked, what are the other issues, plural, right? A lot of times people are like, what are the number one thing that young people care about? And like all of us, they care about many issues
Yeah.
because we do not live single issue lives, right? And so, we see, of course, young people taking action on climate change, on fighting to cancel student debt, on fighting for free college. As it relates to healthcare, one of the most the highest rated, most important topics young people care about is reducing the cost of prescription drugs. And sometimes people are like, wait, what? why do young people think that? Well, young people also access prescription drugs, and also so do our family members. And we talk about this. And so really, you're not going to see a ton of variation with young people compared to other generations on some issues, yes, but you might see a larger amount of young people who are going to prioritize many issues versus just a couple, right? That this is for Gen Z. They're coming into adulthood in the middle of this recession, right? In the middle of this pandemic. How are they able to support their families? What does their access to education look like? How clean is the air they're breathing? I'm originally from California, and the air back home is normally not clean because I'm from the Central Valley, but especially now with the wildfires, right? Yeah. So all of these issues, young people are championing in their communities and really just trying to make a world that is better for all of us at the end of the day. So, in some ways it's like pick an issue, but it really is just a greater commitment to making sure we're all able to live with dignity and thrive.
So I think, President Biden, when he was first elected, of course, had this, sort of very high approval ratings, and not surprisingly, as an administration goes on, approval ratings tend to dip a little bit. What does that look like, though, for Generation Z? I think there's all sorts of issues that we could point to, but what are they seeing, in this administration that they work so hard to get elected? Is there general approval? Are there specific issues that are more troubling the way the administration is handling them?
Yeah, the number one issue coming into 2020, no surprise, was the pandemic. And so I think we're seeing some general thumbs up on how the administration is handling the pandemic. We're in a very different place, right, than we were a year ago, although there's more to be done, absolutely. But I think that the administration, so often folks get into office and they want to be a bit timid in how they're governing. And we know the Senate is tight. But young people need this administration to be bold, because we need to be able to feel the impact of a Biden administration. We need to feel it on our pocketbooks. We need to feel it in how we're able to go out into our communities. And this is where the administration should be doing more. Friends at March for Our Lives, for example, will talk. There should just be someone at the White House that's in charge of gun violence prevention. And looking at this as a public health issue, because it does impact our ability to the health of ourselves and our communities. We need to have student debt be canceled. And this is something that is absolutely important to young people, but also our parents and our grandparents who are either paying off their debt still, or maybe they co-signed on loans for their kids or their grandkids, right? Mm-hmm. That we need to feel that impact. And there's been some good progress, but not enough. Especially when things are so tight that we can't do incremental change. That is, people don't feel incremental change. We need to be big and we need to be bold, and we need the administration to rise to the occasion that we're in today, which includes things like getting rid of the filibuster, so we can actually make progress on the issues that impact our daily lives.
Yeah. I want to ask too about the situation at the border, the sort of terrible images that were coming out about the way the Border Patrol was treating the people trying to cross over who were from Haiti. What are the ways that Generation Z, that the young people are viewing that sort of thing? Do they have different sort of views on immigration and human rights than maybe not different than prior generations, but sort of in the way they sort of see the importance of these issues?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to keep in mind when we look at the millennial generation in particular, and I need to dig in more in some of the Generation Z data, but we're looking at heavily immigrant generations that are first and second generation immigrants, and numbers that we haven't seen in this country for about 100 years. And so the topic of immigration is incredibly important, because so many of us have a story that's very recent in our family about our families coming here. We grew up going to school alongside people who now have DACA. We marched in marches to make sure that our friends and our community members have a pathway to citizenship. And we turned out when the Trump administration was actively harming people on the border. And so to see what happened in Del Rio under this administration was just so inexcusable. To see people from the administration saying that Haiti is just fine to send people back to, many of whom who have not lived in that country for years, is unacceptable. This is a country where the US has blood on its hands for the treatment of Haiti. And so, yeah, young people are seeing those images and they're horrified and they're angry and they're looking to the administration to, they have to take another path forward. So it's heartbreaking. And I think about the amazing young leaders of like the Undocumented Black Network, who are really saying, we are going to tackle immigration and anti-Blackness in our communities at the same time. As a member of the Latinx community, this is something that we have a lot of work to do. It was heartbreaking because we know that a lot of the people who were members of the Border Patrol, who were on those horses, also identify as Latino. And so it was heartbreaking to see, but where I have hope is because of young people who have been speaking up to say, this is not acceptable. We are not going to let this happen in our names. And when I look specifically into different communities like my own, it's young Latinos who are really saying, we actually have to address anti-Blackness in our communities. And that is some of what gives me hope. It's the demands for change led by Undocumented Black Network, led by United We Dream, and other young people and other movements who are jumping on board and saying, yep, we're following their leadership because this is not how we are going to allow our government to represent us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is, of course, Hispanic Heritage Month right now. And so I wanted to ask you too about being a Latina leader of an organization and what that experience has been like for you, and sort of reflect on that as you're moving on, you're stepping out of this role. So talk to me some about what that experience has been like.
It has been such an honor. It has been an honor to serve in this role and to really work at, making sure that my community is also like centered in the work that we're doing to organize young people. It has been also tough that frequently. I'm one of the few, not just like Latinas in the room, but one of the few people of color in a lot of rooms. That frequently I'm asked to speak not only about young people and the powerful work that they lead, but also to be an expert on the Latinx community. Yeah. And while I certainly know my community well, those are just some of what the work is. There's things I'm really proud of, though. I'm really proud of how we've tried to make sure that there was room for us to dig in on other issues as a multiracial network. So, we actively follow the lead of groups like United We Dream because immigration is such an important issue for young Latinos across the country. I've been really proud of I have a bunch of badass Latinos on my team, and to see so many that apply, I hope that means that I've been doing a good job at creating the type of organization that they want to work for. And I'm really proud of the organization that I'm going to be leaving behind. I'm 37. It's a youth org. I'm too old. I got to make room for new leadership. And we do different kinds of work. Certainly at the Alliance, we help raise money for groups across the country. We do a lot of capacity building and skills development. But ultimately, we need young folks to step into this role. And so I hope I'm leaving the organization behind stronger than when I inherited it. And, but yeah, it is, I would not be able to be in this place if not for my incredible community of peer EDs of color. And that they have been so key in my being able to not just stick around, but to kind of dig in on the issues in a different kind of way and show my leadership in a different kind of way than I may have otherwise.
What are the ways that community helps you, that, and I think that's important that we think about, that it's not enough to just have one executive director of color somewhere, but that having a community is so important. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe some experiences that you've had where that community has been helpful?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been one, we show up for each other in a lot of rooms where not all of us are welcome. And so to be able to make sure that my peers have key information about how my organization is showing up, and then hearing later from peers who are in the room that yeah, this leader threw down for y'all. There's a way that we try to create room at a table for each of us, even though we may not always be able to be in those exact rooms. Being an ED can be a really lonely job too. And so having folks to just lean on and ask tough questions of, there's not always, there's not, our organizations don't always reflect our values. And so digging into like the weeds of what does my employee handbook look like? What are the benefits I'm providing for my team? How are we all dealing with things like burnout, right? Those are the questions that we'll dig into with each other. Sometimes I'm like just running by things that are in my gut with them of like, am I crazy here? Or is this real? And so the community has been incredibly helpful for me as like all of these things have happened, especially, most of my time in this role was during the Trump years, and that was pretty darn tough.
Yeah. So tell us how people can either get involved with or help support the Alliance for Youth. Sorry, I tripped over my words as I was talking.
No, all good. Yeah, so if folks want to get involved with any of the groups in the Alliance for Youth Action Network, we welcome you. So go to our website, allianceforyouth.action.org. There, if you click on local organizing, there's a map that shows where all of the incredible groups in our network are. So check them out. And we'd love to have you sign up for our list, become volunteers, and get ready, of course, for National Voter Registration Day on Tuesday.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone should follow on Twitter and, on the other social media so we can help lift that message on Tuesday as well. Sarah, is there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
I mean, the only thing that I'd uplift is, again, the purpose of NVRD and a lot of these civic holidays is to have fun, is that we've got to bring joy back to our democracy. And so what this is going to look like across the country is, I think in Texas, our crew is doing more than 50 events across the state of Texas on these different campuses. And there's going to be food and music at events. We have folks partnering with local businesses in Montana. That's the work of our crew, Forward Montana. We have this amazing Asian organizing crew in Nevada called ACDC, and they're going to be on UNLV's campus with baby goats and therapy animals to say, come hang out. Let's be a community with each other, and absolutely make sure you're registered to vote. So times are hard, but also, again, we just have to cling on to that joy. And that's what groups in our network are doing. And it's part of why I'm just honored to be in this role and uplift them whenever I can.
I love it. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me again. It was great to talk to you, and I hope everyone will get out the voter registration for Voter Registration Day.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kelly.